Robyn Brown sat in front of the cameras and openly admitted, in her own words, that she had been communicating with both Meri and the catfish throughout the entire scandal. And somehow, she expected the audience to accept that she was merely acting as a supportive sister wife. The nerve is honestly staggering. In a recently resurfaced clip from the season 20 tell, all host Sukanya directly pressed Robyn on why Meri might have valid reasons not to trust her. What Robyn said in response was beyond delusional. She stared straight into the camera and announced, quote, "I absolutely do not believe Meri has grounds to distrust me. Take a second and really let that land. This is a woman who has just acknowledged that she was playing both sides during one of the most humiliating and painful chapters of Meri's life. Yet she truly cannot comprehend why trust would be an issue." The catfishing scandal nearly broke Meri Brown. It laid bare her vulnerability, her isolation, her desperation for emotional connection in a marriage where she had been emotionally abandoned for years. And now we are finding out that Robyn, the same woman who presented herself as Meri's closest ally during that ordeal, was quietly funneling information back to Cody the entire time. She was never just a shoulder to lean on. She was a conduit, an informant. And based on what continues to surface from this tell, she may have been the one who made everything far worse. People close to the production are already calling this the most explosive revelation to come out of season 20. One insider didn't mince words, saying, quote, "Robyn has been playing innocent for a decade, but her own admissions finally confirmed what viewers suspected all along. She was never on Meri's side, she was on Cody's side, and she used Meri's pain to cement her status as the favorite wife." And frankly, they're not wrong. Once you strip away the tears and the carefully curated victim storyline, what's left is a calculated pattern of manipulation that has played out over the entire lifespan of this show. The US Weekly clip making the rounds shows Robyn recounting private conversations with an unsettling level of detail. She knew about the flowers. She knew about the texting. She knew about the flirting. And she insists she knew all of this because she was trying to help. But here's the reality. Real help doesn't involve running to your shared husband with every intimate detail of another wife's emotional affair. Real help doesn't mean positioning yourself as the moral compass, while your sister wife's life is collapsing around her. What Robyn inadvertently revealed during this tell all goes well beyond the catfishing scandal itself. It exposes a behavioral pattern that has been hiding in plain sight for 20 seasons. The season 20 finale tell all has been absolute chaos. And that's putting it kindly. 4 parts of non-stop disorder, bouncing wildly from one subject to the next, with the kind of frantic energy that makes it clear the producers were sitting on dynamite and had no idea which fuse to light first. Sukanya, brought in to manage this disaster, has done her best to keep things contained, but even she appears overwhelmed by the sheer number of accusations, contradictions, and jaw-dropping revelations being hurled across that stage. For anyone who might be newer to the Sister Wives world, here's a quick refresher on the catfishing scandal that shook this family back in 2015. Meri Brown, Cody's first wife and legal spouse at the time, became involved in an online relationship with someone she believed was a man named Sam. The connection grew emotional and deeply personal, with Meri clearly seeking the validation and intimacy she wasn't getting in her marriage. When it was revealed that Sam was actually a woman orchestrating an elaborate catfishing scheme, Meri was publicly humiliated, voicemails were leaked, private photos surfaced. It was a disaster on every level, and the family used it as leverage against her for years afterward. Now here's what makes this newly surfaced tell all clips so incredibly damaging. For years, Robyn has insisted she was Meri's anchor during that period. She has carefully crafted the image of herself as the one wife who stayed, who supported Meri, who refused to shame her for a mistake rooted in loneliness and emotional neglect. That version of events has largely been accepted within the Sister Wives narrative, with Robyn cast as the compassionate one while Christine and Janelle were portrayed as having stepped away. But the US Weekly footage tells a very different story. In that clip, Robyn casually references private conversations with a level of detail that makes it clear she was far more involved than a simple shoulder to cry on. People familiar with the tell-all production are saying, this is the moment the Robyn Brown mythology finally starts to crumble. One source close to the situation told reporters, quote, "She spoke about those conversations like she was proud of how much she knew. She didn't even realize she was outing herself as the family spy. And when your own words become the smoking gun, there's nowhere left to run. The supportive sister-wife narrative didn't just crack, it went up in flames, courtesy of the woman who built it. The timeline of the catfishing scandal has always been confusing, with family members offering conflicting versions of who knew what and when. But Robyn admitting that she was communicating with both Meri and the catfish at the same time raises questions that simply can't be ignored. How did she even end up in contact with the catfish? Why was she collecting information from both sides? And most importantly, what did she do with that information once she had it? Robyn's own words in this tell all begin to answer those questions, and they obliterate any remaining claim of innocence. Let me read you exactly what Robyn Brown said, because the level of detail is what makes this so damning. Quote, "She was having conversations online about flowers and texting and music and flirting." End quote. Let that sit for a moment. These aren't vague secondhand impressions. This is precise, intimate knowledge of the actual content of Meri's communications. Robyn knew about the flowers. She knew about the music. She knew flirting was involved. You don't know those details unless you're either reading the messages yourself or being fed information directly by someone who is. And here's where it becomes even more explosive. Robyn openly admits that she was the one who told Cody to step in. In her own words, she said she told him, quote, "Get your butt over there." End quote. Let me translate what that really means. Robyn wasn't a passive bystander. She wasn't quietly supporting Meri while respecting boundaries. She was actively supplying Cody with real-time intelligence and directing his response. She was the hub, the information broker, the person pulling the strings while pretending to offer comfort. Sources who've seen the full tell all are calling this the most self-incriminating moment in Sister Wives history. One insider put it this way, quote, "Robyn thought she was proving what a good sister wife she was by showing how involved she'd been. Instead, she proved she was the reason Cody knew everything he later used against Meri for years." The lack of self-awareness is staggering. And honestly, they're right. Most people, when exposed, try to downplay their role. Robyn did the opposite. She went on national television and amplified her involvement, seemingly convinced it made her look noble. But the implication couldn't be clearer. When Meri was at her lowest, isolated, vulnerable, searching for connection, her husband had denied her for years. Robyn was taking notes. She was tracking the details, the flowers, the music, the flirting, and she used that information to position herself as Meri's confidant, while simultaneously serving as Cody's most valuable source. This is the kind of double game that takes a very particular skill set, and based on what we've seen in this tell, Robyn has mastered it. What makes the situation even more infuriating is that she continues to justify her behavior by insisting her intentions were pure. She claims she was only trying to help. She maintains that she had Meri's best interests at heart, but the facts tell a very different story. You don't help someone by reporting every intimate detail of their emotional affair to their husband. You don't support someone by becoming the delivery system for information that will later be used to punish them. And then Robyn said something that completely dismantles her entire defense. Something that proves she knew exactly what she was doing. In what may be the most revealing moment of the entire tell. Robyn admitted something that should have stunned every viewer. Quote, "I was being open with both of them. I was talking to both of them." End quote. Sit with that for a second. Robyn wasn't just communicating with Meri. She was also in contact with the catfish. She was actively engaging with the person who was manipulating and deceiving her sister wife, while simultaneously discussing the situation with Meri herself. That's not support. That's espionage. That's being a double agent. The obvious question is why? Why would Robyn have any reason to maintain communication with the catfish at all? What possible justification could there be for staying in contact with someone who was actively causing harm to a member of her family? The most generous explanation is that she was gathering information to protect Meri. The far more plausible, and frankly more consistent explanation, is that she was collecting information to protect Cody's interests and reinforce her own standing within the family hierarchy. Meri has been making the same accusation for years. She has repeatedly said that Robyn made the catfishing situation worse by reporting everything back to Cody, and now we have Robyn herself, confirming that she was the central information hub connecting everyone involved. She was talking to Meri and extracting the emotional details. She was communicating with the catfish for reasons that remained deeply questionable, and she was relaying information to Cody, instructing him to step in and take control. Every line of communication ran through Robyn. She decided who knew what, and when they knew it. People close to the Brown family are calling this the smoking gun that validates Meri's suspicions once and for all. One insider said, quote, "Meri has been saying for years that Robyn made everything worse, and she was dismissed as bitter and jealous." Now, Robyn admits she was playing both sides the entire time. Meri is owed the biggest apology in reality television history. And honestly, that assessment is dead on. The gaslighting Meri endured from this family, the constant suggestion that her distrust was irrational or imagined, has now been completely dismantled by Robyn's own admissions. The behavior on display here follows a textbook manipulation pattern. First, you present yourself as the victim's ally. Then you collect sensitive information under the guise of support. Next, you funnel that information to the person in power. And finally, you act bewildered when the victim realizes they've been betrayed. Robyn has been running this exact play for more than a decade, and the only reason it's finally come apart is because she couldn't resist showcasing just how involved she was. But there's a deeper layer to this, one that explains why Robyn's actions weren't just personal betrayal, but strategic positioning. To understand what she was really doing during the catfishing scandal, you have to understand how power functions in families like the Browns. In polygamous systems, especially those rooted in fundamentalist ideology, information isn't just knowledge, it's currency. In families like this, the patriarch depends on a steady stream of information to keep control over multiple households, multiple wives, and multiple groups of children. Someone has to keep him informed, and the person who does that most efficiently becomes the most valuable and most protected member of the family. This isn't theory. It's been documented repeatedly by people who have escaped similar systems. The leader, in this case, Cody, can't be everywhere at once. He can't know what every wife is thinking, saying, or doing unless someone is reporting back to him, and whoever becomes his eyes and ears gains extraordinary leverage. That person gets more access to him, more resources, more sway in family decisions, and most critically, protection. Because when you make the leader's life easier, the leader has every incentive to keep you satisfied. Robyn placed herself into that role from the moment she joined this family. People who followed the Browns since the earliest seasons say the pattern was visible right from the start. One longtime observer put it this way, quote, "Robyn was always running information back to Cody about the other wives. She framed it as concern, but it was carefully timed to elevate herself and undermine the others. It was never about helping anyone except herself and Cody. And when you look at the end results, who ended up in the mansion and who ended up divorced, the evidence lines up perfectly." The catfishing scandal wasn't just a personal crisis for Meri. It was an opportunity for Robyn. Here was the first wife, the one who had held legal status for years, making a mistake that could be weaponized indefinitely. And Robyn was in the ideal position to exploit it. By her own admission, she was communicating with both sides. That meant she controlled the narrative. She could tell Cody exactly how serious things were. She could offer Meri reassurance while quietly collecting more ammunition. And she could present herself as the loyal wife who would never do something so reckless. The outcome speaks for itself. Meri spent years treated like an outcast within her own family, with the catfishing scandal repeatedly thrown in her face any time she tried to assert herself or demand respect. Meanwhile, Robyn entrenched her status as Cody's clear favorite, the wife with the biggest house, the most resources, and ultimately, the only one who stayed. Coincidence? Please, this wasn't luck. It was long-term strategy, and the catfishing scandal was just one chapter in a much larger playbook. But Robyn wasn't the only wife participating in this system, and what Janelle admitted on camera proves the tattletale culture ran far deeper than anyone wanted to acknowledge. In a moment that's been largely overshadowed by Robyn's bombshells, Janelle made a confession during the tell, all that deserves serious scrutiny. She admitted that she reported Meri to Cody over advice Meri allegedly received from a woman named Jen Sullivan. According to Janelle, Jen encouraged Meri to take the money and leave, and instead of addressing this directly with Meri or keeping it private, Janelle took that information straight to Cody. For those unfamiliar with the Jen Sullivan situation, here's the context. Jen was apparently someone within Meri's social circle, and the claim is that she advised Meri to secure whatever financial assets she could and exit the family. That is exactly the kind of intelligence a patriarch like Cody would want. If one of his wives is being encouraged to leave and take money with her, he needs to know so he can intervene. And Janelle, by her own admission, supplied that information. But here's where things take a turn. Meri's response to this accusation is unequivocal. Meri says that never happened. She flatly denies that Jen ever gave her that advice. According to Meri, she only recently even heard about this supposed conversation, and she heard it directly from Cody. In other words, Meri is alleging that Janelle either invented the story outright or severely distorted something that was said, then used it to undermine Meri's standing with their shared husband. If Meri's account is accurate, this goes far beyond simple tattling. This is fabrication with the intent to cause harm. People close to the family say this revelation confirms what Meri has been trying to explain for years. One insider summed it up bluntly, saying, quote, "Meri was surrounded by people who ran to Cody with whatever ammunition they could find, real or manufactured. She never had the freedom to just exist in that family without being constantly watched and reported on. When you step back and look at it, it's genuinely abusive." And that's a hard conclusion to argue against, when every conversation might be relayed to the family leader, when even your friendships are treated as potential evidence against you. You're not living in a family. You're living under surveillance. Janelle's admission also shatters the idea that Robyn was the only one engaging in information gathering. For years, Janelle has presented herself as the reasonable wife, the one who just wanted peace and independence. But reasonable people don't rush to their husband with gossip about their sister wife's friends. Reasonable people don't help sustain an environment where everyone has to self-censor because someone might report them up the chain. Janelle was playing the same game as Robyn, perhaps with less finesse, but playing it all the same. And now, an insider has come forward with allegations about what Janelle may have been doing behind the scenes for years. Allegations that completely rewrite the narrative of who was actually preparing to leave. The source who has been supplying information throughout this scandal has dropped what could be the biggest bombshell yet. According to this insider, Janelle reportedly told people off camera that Cody would be, quote, "broke when the show ends," end quote. And here's the real shocker. The source claims Janelle was quietly hiding money and preparing her exit as early as season 5 or 6. That's more than a decade of planning. Over 10 years of setting aside resources while publicly portraying herself as the content. Cooperative sister wife. Let that sink in. For years, viewers have watched Janelle position herself as the level-headed one, the wife who accepted the family structure and made the best of it. But if this source is telling the truth, she was running her own long game the entire time. She understood the show wouldn't last forever. She saw the financial instability coming, and she made sure she wouldn't be the one left empty-handed when it all collapsed. The implications are staggering. If Janelle was planning her departure since season 5 or 6, that means she maintained a facade for more than a decade. Every confessional about loving the family, every scene of cooperation, every moment of apparent commitment to plural marriage would have been part of a performance while she quietly built an exit strategy. The version of Janelle we thought we knew may never have existed. But here's what makes this truly explosive. According to the source, all 3 of Cody's original wives, Christine, Janelle, and Meri, wanted out for years. Christine ultimately followed through, leaving in 2021 and never looking back. Janelle has remained in a strange limbo, technically separated, still filming, still engaged, seemingly unable or unwilling to fully sever ties, and Meri stayed until Cody finally pushed her out, clinging to the hope that something could still be repaired. Sources describe the family's financial dynamics as far more complex than what viewers see on screen. One person familiar with the situation said, quote, "People think Robyn took all the money, but the reality is that every wife was trying to protect her own interests. Janelle may have been the most strategic, but they were all maneuvering. And honestly, can you blame them? In a system where one man controls the finances and redistributes resources based on favor, self-preservation becomes inevitable. The real tragedy is that this structure forced competition instead of cooperation. And only one of these women ever spoke openly about what was actually happening inside that family, only to be punished for it every single day. There's something that has bothered me for the entire run of Sister Wives, and it's this. Meri Brown was the only wife who ever told the truth about how hard plural marriage actually is, and she paid for that honesty every single time. While the other wives performed happiness and fulfillment for the cameras, Meri admitted to jealousy. She admitted to loneliness. She openly acknowledged that sharing a husband was painful and that she struggled with it. And how was that honesty rewarded? She was scapegoated, pushed out, and ultimately erased from the family altogether. People who've observed this family for years say Meri's honesty was viewed as a liability. One insider explained it this way, quote, "In these family systems, you're not supposed to say it's hard. You're supposed to smile, talk about blessings, and keep sweet. Meri couldn't do that. She was too honest, and that made everyone uncomfortable because it forced them to face things they were trying to ignore." That assessment aligns perfectly with what we've seen on screen. Meri's truth-telling was reframed as negativity. Her vulnerability was labeled toxicity. Instead of recognizing her as someone speaking reality, the family treated her as the problem. The source went on to explain that Meri became, quote, "too worldly in the eyes of the family." She developed her own opinions. She grew emotionally. She began to recognize the dysfunction of the family structure for what it was. And in a system built on conformity and submission, that kind of personal growth is dangerous. You can't have one wife developing a critical lens while everyone else maintains the illusion. It threatens the entire structure. What followed was Meri's slow, deliberate isolation. The other wives excluded her from family gatherings. They spoke about her behind her back, and apparently directly to Cody. And when the catfishing scandal happened, it became the perfect excuse to justify treatment that had been escalating for years. Meri was turned into the designated scapegoat, the person everyone could point to as the real issue, so they wouldn't have to confront their own complicity in the family's dysfunction. What makes this especially heartbreaking is that Meri clearly loved her family and desperately wanted things to work. She didn't leave even when the treatment became unbearable. She stayed hoping things would improve, hoping Cody would finally see her worth, hoping the other wives would welcome her back. That hope was exploited for years. And now, the very women who helped dismantle her life are positioning themselves as the victims. But an insider has now come forward with allegations that expose just how hypocritical that narrative really is. And it goes far beyond gossip. The same longtime source who revealed the financial bombshells has now shared information that should force viewers to completely reassess the abuse narrative that's followed Meri for years. According to this insider, all of the wives allegedly used corporal punishment with the children. Not just Meri, all of them. If that's true, then the portrayal of Meri as uniquely abusive, the one wife who crossed lines the others respected, was a coordinated smear that ignored the reality of how every household in this family operated. Let's be clear about what that means. For years, there have been rumors and eventually public claims that Meri was physically harsh with the children, particularly those who weren't biologically hers. Those claims were used to justify her exclusion from family events, her estrangement from certain children, and the idea that she somehow deserved to be cast out. But if this source is accurate, the other wives were engaging in the same behavior, while simultaneously pointing the finger at Meri. Sources explain that within this religious sect, spanking was considered a normal and expected form of discipline. One person familiar with the community said, quote, "Corporal punishment wasn't unusual, it was standard." The fact that Meri was singled out for something everyone was doing is deeply disturbing. They needed a villain. And she was the easiest target because she had already been isolated. That revelation reframes the entire abuse narrative in a way that's impossible to ignore. If everyone was operating under the same cultural rules, then singling out Meri as the problem was never about protecting children. It was about weaponizing accusations against someone the family had already decided to remove. The hypocrisy here is staggering. The very same wives who allegedly used identical disciplinary practices later turned around and used those practices as evidence against Meri alone. They got to preserve their reputations as good mothers, while Meri was cast as someone unsafe, someone untrustworthy, and because she had already been positioned as the family scapegoat, the accusations stuck. People believed them because they had been conditioned to believe the worst about her. That's how scapegoating works. You isolate someone, you chip away at their reputation, and once that groundwork is laid, every future accusation sounds believable, simply because it fits the story people have already accepted. Fairness no longer matters. Accuracy becomes irrelevant. The target has been so thoroughly othered that any negative claim feels plausible. Meri walked straight into a trap that had been carefully built over years, and she never stood a real chance of defending herself because the verdict had already been reached before the trial ever began. So where does that leave the Brown family as season 21 approaches? And is there any real chance of accountability? TLC has confirmed season 21, but sources say it may very well be the final chapter. The reason is simple: the adult children don't want to film anymore. The kids who grew up on camera, who had their childhoods turned into entertainment, who watched their family unravel in front of millions, are done. They've had enough, and without the next generation, the show loses its core appeal. No one wants to watch Cody and Robyn sitting alone in a McMansion pretending everything is fine. Janelle is in a particularly complicated spot. Sources say she's torn between wanting to be completely finished with Cody and the circus that comes with filming, and needing the income the show provides. Unlike Christine, who's built a successful independent brand, and unlike Robyn, who has Cody's backing and the assets they've accumulated together, Janelle's financial situation appears far more fragile. The same source who alleged she had been hiding money also suggested her preparations may not have gone as smoothly as she hoped. She may genuinely need that TLC paycheck just to stay afloat, which means she could be trapped in a situation she's reportedly wanted to escape for years. And then there's Robyn. Despite everything that came out in this tell-all, despite openly admitting she was communicating with both Meri and the Catfish during Meri's darkest chapter, despite confirming she acted as the information pipeline to Cody, Robyn remains completely defiant. In her own words, quote, "I know what my intentions were," end quote. That statement says everything. She isn't apologizing. She isn't acknowledging the harm she caused. She isn't even pretending to understand why anyone might be upset. She knows what her intentions were. And apparently, that's supposed to excuse everything. I have to say, Robyn is giving serious Blake Lively energy here. The type of person who leaves destruction in her wake but never accepts responsibility. The kind of person who believes declaring good intentions is the same thing as actually having them. The kind of person who watches the fire spread and somehow convinces herself she's the victim of the flames she lit. It would almost be impressive if it weren't so damaging. So here's what I want to hear from all of you. After everything revealed in this tell, all after Robyn admitted she was talking to both Meri and the Catfish, after she confirmed she was feeding information to Cody, after Janelle acknowledged her own tattletale behavior, after insiders exposed the financial maneuvering and the hypocrisy surrounding the abuse allegations, where do you stand? Do you believe Robyn was genuinely trying to help Meri during the catfishing scandal? Or was she Cody's ultimate spy all along, quietly positioning herself for the throne she now occupies alone? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is far from finished, and the Brown family still has plenty of secrets left to unravel.